what I want to talk about is mainly physicalism and the problems of physicalism. Why? Because this is a kind of worldview that came to ascendance in the latter part of the 19th century, dominated the 20th century, and is still really dominates central parts of science, particularly the parts that I've been involved in, psychology, neuroscience, and so on. It comes in many flavors. It's kind of a philosophically purified, somewhat more ascetic version of the materialism of previous centuries. And it comes in a variety of flavors, but it basically goes like this. All facts are determined in the end by physical facts alone. Events occur in a kind of pre-established container consisting of 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. Reality consists at bottom of little bits of matter, some kind of as yet unknown stuff, flying around in fields of force in accordance with mathematical laws. And everything else has to be constructed out of that. That applies particularly clearly to the external world that we seem to inhabit together, but it applies to us as well. We're nothing more than fantastically complicated biochemical machines. Everything in mind and consciousness is manufactured by neurophysiological processes occurring in our bodies and brains. Our customary sense of ourselves as conscious agents, equipped with some degree of free will and able to carry out our purposes, is illusory. That stuff belongs only to folk psychology. In reality, it's just kind of illusory byproducts of the grinding of our neural machinery. And of course, since we're so entirely dependent on our brains, when we die, there's no possibility of any kind of postmortem survival or anything of that sort. So those kinds of beliefs, which are present in virtually all human societies and religions, cannot possibly be true. And on a more cosmic scale, we see no sign of final causes or teleology in nature, no sign of any kind of transcendent order. So really, on the grandest scale, the plan of nature seems to be utterly without meaning or purpose. That's the kind of view that most scientists, contemporary scientists, in the sort of areas that I work in, at least in their day jobs, take seriously as a description of nature. Now, that's pretty bleak. It's also quite pervasive. I mean, it not only extends to most of the central areas of science, but as Jeff Kripal said earlier, it's taken possession of the humanities, even religious studies, which I find quite amazing. In fact, Jeff will know about this. A colleague of ours, Bill Barnard, once explained to me that more than half of the members of the Academy of Religion are actually physicalists whose prime interest in their subject matter is reducing spiritual experiences to some physical process in the brain, probably something abnormal or pathological in our brain. And I think it can also be shown, although I certainly won't try to do it here, that despite all the wonderful things that science has produced, it's also created a lot of our current problems. The sort of relentless consumerism and unbridled commerce and so on has led to pollution, some various threats to the planet. So it's bleak, it's pervasive, and it seems to be having some terrible effects that we'd like to avoid if possible. But is it true? And of course, I think it is not true, along with a lot of other people. And I'd like to say something about why I came to these views. I should say first that, of course, other people are better qualified than I to pursue this aspect, but physics itself has moved on. This physicalism that I'm talking about is really an anchored in late 19th century physics. Physics has moved on tremendously. The rise of quantum theory and relativity has basically eroded most of the foundations of the view that I described, which is philosophy, no longer science. Also, there's been a lot of work in philosophy of mind, which has focused on aspects of everyday consciousness, echoing you, Bernardo, here. Perfectly ordinary properties of our mental life are proving extremely difficult to reconcile with a physicalist point of view. Consciousness itself, the intentionality of thought and speech, our ability to think about things and talk about things in the external world. Our ability to understand meanings, including metaphorical meanings, the presentation of consciousness as unified wholes experienced from a subjective point of view, and most importantly, the qualitative fields of consciousness, what it's like to taste a lemon or fall in love and so on, all have proved so difficult to reconcile with a physicalist point of view that many philosophers of mind and even a few neuroscientists now have come to the conclusion that we're never going to be able to provide a physicalist explanation of consciousness. But what I want to do is to bring things more into my own territory, which has to do with human psychophysiology. And to do that, we need to kind of go back to the basics of the situation. What we have is we have two streams of things. We have events and physical events going on constantly within ourselves. We're also, the man in the street is a kind of a dualist, a naive dualist who experiences a world out there and stuff going on inside and wonders about the connection between the two. Under normal conditions, they're strongly correlated for sure. We know that physical things can influence mental things. For example, if you get hit on the head hard enough, or drink too much, or ingest a psychedelic substance, there will be big changes in your interior life. But what about causality in the other direction? Let's say I'm listening to a lecture by a physicalist and I become exercised and want to ask him a question, so I raise my hand. Isn't that an example of mental causation? Mental stuff causing a physical thing? Well, no, says the physicalist, you've just kind of misunderstood what's going on here, because really that idea and intention that you have is just a pattern of neuroelectric activity in your brain, and that's what really caused your hand to go up in the air. Physical causes physical, no problem. Well, that's a very difficult argument to undermine. And the best way of attacking it is to identify things that cannot be done by the unaided brain.